Hi, I am Tony Russo, and this is In Case You Missed It from Kates-Boylston for the week ending Friday, January 30th, 2026. We got a ton of stuff to talk about. This week we have some pet cremation stories, some regular cremation stories, and all sorts of stories involving funeral business. After all, that is what we do here. But before we get to any of those, we would like you to listen to these messages from our friends and sponsors at Passages International. Today's families are asking for greener, more meaningful funeral options, but many funeral homes are still struggling to meet that demand. With 68% of consumers expressing interest in sustainable choices, the gap between what families want and what many providers offer is widening. For more than 25 years, Passages International has helped funeral homes stay ahead of evolving expectations with biodegradable, fair trade, and innovative memorial products that resonate with today's families. Discover how sustainability can strengthen your service offerings at passagesinternational.com. First up, as usual, I would like to preview the upcoming issue of Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter, due out February 5th. We've just kind of finished off the stories in that, and the first one anyway that I want to talk about is pet cremation related. If you are not familiar with the story, Patrick Vereb, he is the former owner, I guess the current owner of Eternity Pet Memorial, is set to stand trial in June of 2026 for fraud after it is alleged, systematically defrauded more than 6,500 clients over a 3-year period using large animals' cremated remains to give to small animal pet owners and just discarding the carcasses elsewhere. What made me nervous was the idea that it is going to be a trial. That means he is expected or has already pled not guilty, which means that he may be able to get off, and that didn't seem right to me. So I shot a note to Donna Sugart-Bethune, who runs I always get this one wrong, it's a long one, International Association of Pet Cemeteries and Crematories, and to see, if she'd been following the case, and she brought me up to speed. I have her response in the newsletter, but what's important for you to know is that while it's unlikely, one hopes it's unlikely that he'll, not be charged. And there's also a class action lawsuit against him. But there are holes through which these violators can fall. And what's really interesting is that the International Association of Pet Cemeteries and Crematories helps states when they want to make laws, and encourages states to make laws governing the pet crematories, because they believe it's better for everyone if there are rules and standards, especially when it comes to pets, because we had a webinar this week, and we spoke with Sam Siebert of BioResponse Solutions, and they're the creators of Aquamation. And one of the things that I'm sure you know, but in case you don't, pet aquamation is legal everywhere. There's no rules about how to dispose of pets, or there are few rules about how to dispose of pets, which is why Donna is so interested in making sure there are rules. So that's the first story that I think you would get a kick out of if you read. The other story is really just kind of an update. Luke Foreman, who he's a funeral director in Billings, North Dakota, and I had profiled him last year because he has one of those Ask the Funeral Director columns that he and his colleagues all participate in. He has joined Gather, the platform for funeral homes, and we talk a little bit about his decision to join Gather and how it works as a funeral director. And so that's another story in this week's Funeral Service Insider, the newsletter. All right, well, now let's get to the rest. So I wanted to share this story about a pet crematory closing in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, Canada, because they kind of came out with both guns blazing, and it is something that I know is an issue for pet cremators. And the gentleman's name is Edward Reindress, and he is the owner of Metro Pet Crematory there in Dartmouth, and it is closing because it has been outcompeted, he says, by a corporately owned competitor that is just a couple minutes away, and they have, according to him, kind of locked down the veterinary businesses, and the local veterinary businesses, again, he claims, are also corporately owned. So the corporately owned vet clinics are sending their decedent pets to the corporately owned pet crematory, and that has driven him out of business, is his claim. And it's interesting, like, to come out guns blazing like this, for sure, and also interesting because of the dynamic. Again, we had this webinar just recently about aquamation, and they talked about pet aquamation, and this is one of the concerns. Getting into a veterinary clinic can be hard for some aquamators, which is one of the things, if you'd like, there's a link in the show notes to the webinar. You should check it out because they do talk about this. But the importance of getting in with veterinary clinics is like inversely proportional to the difficulty with for getting in to these clinics, because of these relationships that may be corporate, may be out of town, may not have any local connections. And that's something to take into consideration before you get into the business. But if you're already in the business, building these relationships isn't just critical. It is absolutely essential to be able to run your business. And so I'll have a link to the story. He is pretty open about why he thinks the reasons are. They were also kind of price pressured, he claims, because of the corporate pet crematory. They had to keep their prices lower than they were able, and eventually they just closed their doors. There are a couple of pets left, or were a couple of pets left the last week of January when this story was written, and he said that he would just finish them off but was not accepting any new pets. And now the corporate place will get all of the pets in the area, and that is how it goes. Link in the show notes. So this actually came out as hospice news, but it's funeral news too, so I'm going to share it with you. A bipartisan coalition in Congress is moving to permanently end a long-standing glitch in federal law that has forced the families of some terminally ill veterans to choose between home care and the burial benefits they earned through the service. Gerald's Law, which is named after Gerald Jerry Elliott, he is a U.S. Army veteran from Michigan, and when he transitioned from a VA hospital to home hospice to be with his family, his survivors learned that they were no longer entitled to the burial allowance they had expected, and it has to do with the way the law was written. They call it the home care loophole, and if veterans decide to die at home, or decide to take hospice at home and die in hospice at home, then they can lose their burial benefits. There was a stopgap temporary law, it says here, that was part of Senator Elizabeth Dole's 21st Century Veterans Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act, but it was only a pilot program, and it is set to expire in October 2026. So now Congress, I expect, I don't know how high it is on their list this week, but Congress is supposed to address this so that starting in, I guess, November of 2026, veterans who die in a home hospice don't lose their burial benefits. There's a link to the story in the show notes. And finally, New Hampshire lawmakers are rallying behind a proposal to legalize natural organic reduction in the Granite State. The legislation is cleverly titled the Live Free and Die Free Act. And it has a lot of bipartisan support. A lot of libertarians like the idea that you should be able to get buried, or your disposition should be one of your own choosing. And a lot of Democrats are for the ecological nature of the process. We've talked about this before, and I will continue to talk about it forever, I guess. The thing is that passing it doesn't make it legal. I mean, it makes it legal, but not possible oftentimes. And so that is going to be a hurdle. And if it passes, then actually it looks as if, it looks as if they're working on amendments to the bill now that will include the technical gaps, the soil testing protocols, and the licensing requirements, which it hasn't been common, as you may recall from a recent podcast. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll make it legal, and then they'll figure out how it's legal. And that's why places in New York, for example, have the trouble that they're having getting everything up and running and organized. The other thing, of course, is there are the naysayers, and I always love to call them out because it's just interesting. David Bryant, who is the president of the New Hampshire Funeral Directors Association, said that unlike, human cremated remains, composted body produces too much dirt for them to dispose of safely. And of course, the Catholics are out in force saying that it's an undignified way to treat the human body. As opposed to, again, I always like to remind you that is undignified, but if you cut off a saint's pinky and send it around the world to establish a shrine to that saint, a tourist attraction, that's fine. So I always like to point out the strange ways that the Catholics consider what violates human dignity and what doesn't. And they are hopefully going to get this passed this year. If they do, at this recording, they would be the 14th state to have legal natural organic reduction. But again, I think it's only like 3 or 4 states where there are facilities that can do it. So anyway, link to that in the show notes. And that will do me for this time. In case you missed it, From Kates-Boylston is a Kates-Boylston production. It was written and edited and videoed by me, Tony Russo. Please subscribe wherever you're listening now or wherever you're watching now. If you have any feedback, we are always open to it, and I will check in with you next time.